Hello, everyone. My name is Amrita Sandhu, and I'm a registered clinical counselor. I'm trying a little bit of a new series out here, and I had this idea that I wanted to set up a podcast or a YouTube show, something mental health oriented. And of course, my first idea was to have a co host. So I asked around, and unfortunately, no one was willing to embark on this journey with me. And then started rolling in the self doubt, the insecurities, those stories, right? So then I went, you know what? I'm not just going to talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk. So I used my own strategy on myself. I used the if then technique. The if then technique is basically you take what you're afraid of and you say, if that happens, then what? And you just keep breaking it down over and over and over until you land in a answer that's a little bit comfortable and more easy to swallow and chew. So I go, all right, if I can't find a co-host and I have to do it alone, as I am, as you can see, then what? And I said, well, then people might say this is not interesting enough. There's not enough dialogue. There's not enough banter. And then I said, okay, if people say that, then what? Then maybe I won't get a lot of views and it'll be a waste of time and I should have just stuck to TikTok. Then I go, okay, then what? And then I said, well, it doesn't really matter. Then I can just go back to TikTok. So, anyways, moral of the story, once you have this little insecurity or self doubt in your mind, it can hold you back. It can deter you from doing things and reaching your full potential. But there's a reason that this self doubt is there to begin with. Now, all of us have like a highlight reel of shame or embarrassment. What's usually at the root of that is something called a shame wound. So, a shame wound is something that's happened earlier in life that we're keeping tucked down deep and away, and it really hinders our ability to get out there and perform and achieve and do what we want to do. Now, for me, I very much know where my shame room wound originated. It originated in the womb. I know that sounds so strange and bizarre, but I am a child who has a massive age gap between myself and my siblings, meaning I was a pleasant surprise. You can guess what that was like for South Asian parents in the 80s, right? So I heard as I was growing up a lot of stories of my mom saying that they didn't share the news, that they were a little bit embarrassed. Well, she said it in different terms, but the idea is that an unplanned pregnancy in that generation for our culture is a little bit taboo, and sometimes people can gossip about it. So I have this one relative who then came from overseas to visit, and he sees my brother and sister. They're 8 and 10 years my elder. And then he sees this baby and he goes, hey, who's this? And then my mom goes, oh, yeah. So, anyways, my mom tries to play it off all cool and casual, and she goes, oh, that's Amrita. She's 6 months old. We told you guys. We wrote you a letter. Back then, I guess letters was the main form of communication for overseas. And he goes, no, no, you didn't. Anyway, so this shame, you can imagine maternal mental health while they're pregnant does impact the fetus in utero. So I'm not saying that I became this very shy, insecure, not confident little child because my mom was a little bit embarrassed for getting pregnant when she was past her quote unquote childbearing years. But what I'm saying is, when a mom goes through something, the offspring will absorb that energy as they're developing in their mom's tummy. So, lo and behold, I did end up being a really shy kid, a really, really anxious, mega, like you look up social anxiety, that was me to a T. So, this pattern would just repeat and just keep showing up in different ways. I tried to push it down, I tried to push it away, but I was, in fact, a very, very anxious child, adolescent, and young adult. Fast forward some years and some change, and I'm in my undergrad now. And what does undergrad for psychology mean? A whole lot of presentations. So I would, and I'm really putting myself out there by sharing this vulnerable information, but I would go into the bathroom, have a full blown panic attack before a presentation, be gagging and nauseous and in a cold sweat and almost at the brink of falling unconscious. And then I'd splash some water on my face, push it all down, and mask as we do. and I would go do my presentation because my grades always mattered to me more than anything. So I was able to mask it enough to just get the task done. But why I am sharing this at all is because sometimes we think these things are set in stone. Oh, I'm an anxious person. I'm a socially anxious person. I'm an insecure person. I have imposter syndrome. I have low self esteem. I'm not a confident girl. That's for so and so. Because of XYZ, I can't start the podcast. I can't go back to school. Whatever the story is we're telling in our minds, usually there's a little bit of tools and resources that are going to help rewire that wiring that is hindering our progress. All right. Now, I'm not saying I went and got my psychology undergrad and I learned about all this stuff and I became this mega confident person. No. As I mentioned right at the beginning of this, I still have my insecurities. I still have my stories that hold me back, and I still have my doubts and the things I'm shameful about. We've all got this little highlight reel. We've all got that little thing that likes to flash. When we are embarrassed, when someone hurts our feelings by putting us down or highlighting one of our insecurities, why does it pack so much punch? Why does it land in the way that it does? Well, usually because it's not just connected to what's happening in the here and now, it's going and pulling up all that old trauma. So for me, when I have these experiences, when someone kind of says, "Hey, you only make filtered videos," or "Hey, I never see you without makeup on," or "Hey, what school did you get your graduate degree from? Was it an online school?" I'm able to push past a lot of it, but of course, that inner little girl in me sometimes feels shameful because at one point, my very existence was something there was embarrassment about. So, what I'm trying to say is if someone tries to make you feel insecure, or you yourself feel insecure and you're shy and you're anxious, and when you're walking into a party, maybe you're trembling, maybe you're shaking, maybe something is holding you back from showing up in the way that you really want to, then it's worthwhile to go and revisit that highlight reel and trace it all the way back to in the womb if you have to. But to put pen to paper and be like, all right, what's in my highlight reel? What are all the moments that I felt less than, not good enough, unaccepted, like I didn't belong, rejected? What are all the times that my core emotional needs were not being met or, in fact, violated? I'll give you another little story. A few months ago, I had a funeral to attend. It was an extended family member. So my children were not with me, but I went with my parents. I tagged along. Now, when you get married, as you married people know, these types of opportunities to just be you and your parents is rather rare without your spouse, without your offspring. So I'm feeling all the feelings. I'm like, man, I remember what it used to be like to be a part of this family unit. And I'm just kind of mindlessly following them along. I'm in their car, I'm in the back seat, and I'm not even thinking. I get to switch my brain off. And as we're walking in, as usual, when you're going to a funeral, you get a little nervous, you get a little sad, you get a little shaky. So then I just kind of absentmindedly say to my parents, I go, "Jinne marji veri mai the ajama, mera halle vi dil khabra janda. मैं कंबन ला पैनी." So, translated, that means no matter how many times I come here, I still end up getting really shaky when I'm walking inside the doors. And then my dad kind of laughs and says to my mom, "Huh, TikTok jogi hai." So what that means is, oh, I guess it's all just for TikTok. In other words, I don't use my own tools and resources. So my dad is a lovely man. He is who has made me who I am. And I am by no means bashing him by sharing this story. The reason I'm sharing this story is because when he said that, it hurt. It hurt not because what he was saying was super mean or aggressive or antagonizing in that moment. It hurt because I already had that seed of doubt in myself planted, that am I really who I say I am? Am I really how I portray myself to be? Because goodness knows we all have that little panel of judges, that subconscious panel of judges, the naysayers, the haters, the people who have done us wrong, the bullies. And we're constantly comparing our achievements and our capabilities to what we think those people are really thinking and saying, right? And so when he said that, it just kind of reminded me of like, am I a fraud and am I an imposter? Is he right? Right? We only get triggered when we think there's a grain of truth to what someone's saying. So then it stuck with me, of course. I'm a emotional person. I'm an empath. That means I feel everything around me a lot. That means I feel my own stuff a lot. It can really linger. And then I talked about it with my spouse, and I was like, "Man, do you think that? Do you think I'm just a phony?" And he goes, "Amrita, you're making mental health videos. You're talking about stuff no one's spoken about before. What do you think that's triggering for dad?" And all of a sudden, then phew, role reversal. I take myself out of the moment, emotional detective work, time to use another one of the tools. The person who's making the comment, the person who's addressing the individual in the arena, what that individual's doing bring up in terms of their past traumas, their insecurities, their unmet needs? Usually that is your blueprint for understanding why do people sometimes say hurtful things? Why do people sometimes poke and trigger your insecurities? Now, of course, with our parents' generation, a lot of the time it's just there's no filter. Something pops into their head, it comes out of their mouth. They don't have malicious intent. They just don't have that filter or that pause. They're not cognizant of it because that's something us in the Western world have, because we're a lot more mindful of how things land, how we're making other people feel. We have conscientiousness as a part of our values. There's no room for conscientiousness when you're shoulder to shoulder in Delhi or Punjab, right? It's every man for himself. Different mindset, different mentality, different blueprint. So in that moment, I go, all right, I got some new tools and resources. I'm in this new space, this new area of putting myself out there, being vulnerable, walking the walk. So now what do I have to do going forward? I got to watch the stories in my mind. And you too, watching this now, can note this down. Watch the stories that are going on in your mind. Use the if then technique. And then every time you have a trigger, every time there's a naysayer or your loved one, or there's something that just pokes at you and acts like a hindrance, try to trace it back and be like, what does this remind me of from an earlier in life? What else is this connected to? Connect the dots is such a huge game changing type of mental exercise to do. And every time you chip away from one of the old things, now when something new comes along, when a new comment enters the chat, it won't pack that much punch anymore because you've done the deeper root work. And that's such a huge part of building self esteem and confidence and empowerment and breaking away from self doubt and imposter syndrome. Is we can't just fake it to make it all the time. Sure, we'll get the ball rolling, jumpstart that way. But if we want to make it sustainable and if we want to keep leveling up in whatever our endeavor is, then we have to make sure that we're getting to the root of things and we're breaking patterns. We're breaking cycles. And so that doesn't start with telling anyone off or being overly aggressive or assertive or cutting people off, or sure, boundaries are important. Absolutely, boundaries are necessary and they're a huge part of mental health and interpersonal relationships. But the bulk of the work starts with you. All the things that are going on that you want to be different in your life, what's in your control, what's in your power, is how you navigate the things that might be going on the surface and way deep below, down at the root of it all, beneath the surface. Now, our human brains are wired to have a negativity bias. It's a primitive survival advantage to be able to pick up and notice the bad stuff in our life, the perceived dangers or threats, rather than the good stuff in our life. And that's why negative comments and negative thoughts hold more weight than the good stuff. But we have to learn about this stuff. Knowledge is power, and we have to work with this stuff, and we have to understand what's the story going on inside. And that's the only way we can make sure that the ending or that the rest of the story is how we want it to be and written on our terms rather than our insecurities and our doubts terms. What are your thoughts and feelings? Do you think that self-confidence is something that comes from an external inventory check, trying to control and mitigate all the variables that are stopping us in the outside world? Or should we start from inside? Should it be the deeper work in working with our negativity bias, in working with the self-doubt, in working with the shame wound, in dialing it back and getting back to the original root feelings? Is that where we should begin? I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I would love if you could subscribe, like, leave a comment, all that good stuff. And I would love to see you guys back in this space again. As usual, thank you for watching. See you next time.